late afternoon summer sun gradually descended toward the horizon, casting long streaks of golden light over the narrow, rugged country roads of Black Mountain, North Carolina. The lush green fields stretched out like a soft carpet as Ethan Cole, 65, drove his expensive Cadillac home. Ethan had once been one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the real estate industry. His entire life had been dedicated to building a solid empire where numbers, profits, and assets consumed his every thought. After retiring, he possessed everything a man could dream of: a grand mansion in the suburbs, steady and lucrative investments, and an extensive network of elite connections. But after his wife passed away and his children built lives of their own, he realized his life had become terrifyingly empty. Today was no different. Ethan was once again driving home alone after a dinner with an old business partner, a meeting filled with nothing but talk of markets, stocks, and financial gains. The repetitive conversations left him feeling weary. Was this the price of success? A life full of material wealth but devoid of the simplest things, genuine moments, relationships not built on mutual benefit? The car glided through a curve, and just as Ethan was about to turn on some music to break the silence, a sudden thud echoed from beneath the vehicle. His hands instinctively gripped the steering wheel as he felt the car wobble slightly. He sighed, pulled over to the side of the road, and stepped out. A flat tire. Muttering curses under his breath, he took out his phone to call for roadside assistance, but the screen showed no signal. Just perfect. Ethan slumped back into the driver's seat, tapping his fingers impatiently on the steering wheel. He would have to wait for someone to pass by for help. But this was a quiet countryside road, and at this hour few vehicles were likely to come by. The feeling of helplessness irritated him even more. He had spent his whole life in control, of finances, of major decisions. Yet now, he was stranded on an empty road, stopped by nothing more than a flat tire. Minutes passed, and he started feeling restless. But then, in the distance, a small figure appeared. A boy on a bicycle was riding toward him. He looked to be about 16, wearing a faded t-shirt and worn-out jeans. His old sneakers were covered in dust, but his eyes were bright, full of curiosity and determination. Ethan wasn't one to easily trust strangers, but for some reason he felt no unease as the boy approached. "Do you need any help, sir?" the boy asked, his voice sincere. Ethan looked at him, then glanced at the flat tire. "Yeah, my tire's blown." The boy squinted, crouching down to examine the flat tire carefully before looking up at Ethan. "Do you have a spare tire, sir?" Ethan hesitated. A wealthy man like him had never had to deal with something like this. Feeling slightly embarrassed, he nodded and gestured toward the trunk. "I do, but I don't know how to change it." The boy smiled. "That's okay, sir, I can help you." Without waiting for a response, the boy walked over, opened the trunk, pulled out the tools, and knelt beside the damaged tire. His small yet firm hands swiftly loosened each lug nut, his eyes filled with focus and experience. Ethan stood nearby, watching the boy curiously. He didn't hesitate, didn't ask for anything in return. He was simply helping a stranger on the road. Throughout his life, full of deals and transactions, Ethan had grown used to the idea that nothing came without a price. No one helped anyone without expecting something in return. But this boy was different. In less than 10 minutes, the new tire was in place. The boy wiped his hands on his jeans and stood up, smiling with satisfaction. "All done, sir. You can go now." Ethan looked at the boy, and for the first time in years, he felt something unusual, an admiration for someone so young. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a few $50 bills, and held them out to the boy. "Thank you. Take this as payment." But the boy shook his head and raised his hand in refusal. "No need, sir. I just wanted to help." Ethan was stunned. He didn't take the money? A young boy who didn't seem well off, yet he turned down cash? "Are you sure?" Ethan asked again, still finding it hard to believe. The boy nodded firmly. "Yes, sir. If you really want to repay me, then help someone else the next time they need it." Ethan stood there, watching as the boy rode off down the empty road. The money was still in his hand. A strange feeling welled up inside him, something he hadn't experienced in years. Kindness, pure, unconditional. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a warmth stirring in his heart. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his vast mansion. The gourmet steak on the table remained untouched. He looked around his lavish living room with the expensive paintings hung on the walls. The premium leather sofas sat in perfect arrangement. Everything was flawless. Yet, why did he feel so empty? The image of the boy, with his dusty shoes and genuine smile, lingered in his mind. His entire life had been spent dealing with people who prioritized self-interest above all else. Yet today, a complete stranger, a mere boy, had helped him out of pure kindness. That had changed him. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a new sense of determination. He had to find that boy. Not to give him money, but to do something more meaningful. To understand why a boy who had so little could teach him. A man who had everything, such an important lesson. And that was the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. Ethan Cole woke up the next morning feeling different. He had tossed and turned all night, unable to shake the image of the boy quietly changing his tire, expecting nothing in return. His entire life had been spent dealing with people who always sought personal gain, yet that boy, a complete stranger, had helped him without asking for anything. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a deep and urgent calling. He needed to find that boy. Not just to thank him, but to understand him. Why would a boy who seemed to have little refuse money so decisively? Who had taught him such pure, unconditional kindness? After quickly finishing a cup of coffee, Ethan threw on a light jacket and stepped out of his luxurious mansion. He was no longer the powerful businessman he once was, no longer the man who only cared about million-dollar deals. Today he was just an old man, driving through quiet country roads in search of the boy who had unknowingly changed his perspective on life. He drove back to the road where he had gotten a flat tire the day before. When he arrived, he pulled over to the side, hoping the boy might appear just as he had yesterday, but the road was empty, with only vast fields stretching toward the horizon. Refusing to give up, Ethan decided to drive to the nearest town, a small community with a few simple coffee shops and local grocery stores. He parked his car and walked into a roadside cafe, the kind of place where locals gathered every morning. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, smiled warmly as he stepped inside. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" Ethan placed both hands on the counter, hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Do you know a boy about 16 years old, skinny, wearing a faded t-shirt and old sneakers? I met him yesterday, and I'm trying to find him to thank him." The woman furrowed her brow in thought, then her eyes lit up. "You might be talking about Noah Walker." Ethan tilted his head. "Noah?" She nodded. "He lives with his mother on the other side of town. He's always helping people, fixing cars, running errands for neighbors, never asking for anything in return." Hearing this, Ethan felt a wave of emotion rise within him. He had never met a child like that, a person willing to help simply out of kindness, not for personal gain. "Where does he live?" Ethan asked. The woman pointed toward a dirt road leading toward the outskirts of town. "Just follow that road straight ahead and you'll see a small blue house. But don't expect to find him home during the day. Noah's always out and about." Ethan nodded in thanks, left the cafe and got into his car, feeling a mix of anticipation and excitement. When he arrived, he saw exactly what the woman had described. A small blue house, surrounded by an old wooden fence. The house was modest, yet it had a strange warmth to it. Ethan stepped out of his car, walked up to the front door, and knocked lightly. The door opened, revealing a woman in her early 40s. She had kind eyes, but her face bore signs of exhaustion, as if she had carried many burdens in life. "Hello, can I help you?" she asked, her voice cautious. Ethan offered a polite smile. "Sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for Noah. He helped me change a tire yesterday, and I wanted to see him again to thank him." The woman's expression softened immediately. "Ah, you must be the man Noah mentioned last night. He said he met someone who needed help." She opened the door wider. "Come in, please. Noah's out in the backyard." Ethan stepped inside, immediately sensing the stark contrast between this place and his own mansion. The house was small but clean and cozy, with family photos hanging on the walls. It might not have been rich in material wealth, but it was abundantly rich in love. Walking out to the backyard, Ethan saw Noah diligently repairing the wooden fence. The boy looked up at the sound of footsteps, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw Ethan. "You?" Noah stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "What are you doing here?" Essen stepped closer, smiling. "I came to thank you." Noah gave a small smile. "You don't have to do that, sir. I only helped because I wanted to." Ethan took a deep breath and spoke in a warm, steady voice. "Noah, you helped me without expecting anything in return. I've met a lot of people in my life, but it's rare to meet someone like you. I want to know who taught you to live this way." Noah smiled and glanced toward his mother, who stood on the porch. "My mom," he said simply. "She always tells me that if you can do something good for someone, you should, without expecting anything back." Ethan felt something stir deep inside him. He looked at the woman standing there, and in that moment, he understood everything. This was why Noah was different. The boy had grown up in a family that didn't have much in terms of wealth, but they were rich in values and kindness. A kind of upbringing that not everyone, especially people as wealthy as Ethan, had the privilege of receiving. Ethan turned back to Noah, his eyes filled with quiet determination. "I want to do something for you and your mother, not because I think you need it, but because I feel I should." Noah shook his head. "We don't need anything, sir." Ethan smiled. "But if I told you that I want to help, would you refuse?" Noah hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. Ethan nodded. "Then I will help, in my own way." For the first time in years, he felt a genuine warmth in his heart. Standing in front of Noah's small home, Ethan took in the sight. The worn wooden planks on the roof, the faded walls weathered by rain and sun, and the sagging fence surrounding the backyard. But what filled him most wasn't pity. It was deep respect for this family. Noah and his mother didn't have much in terms of material wealth, but they had something Ethan had lost long ago: peace and unconditional kindness. They didn't complain about their struggles. They didn't resent life for its hardships. They simply kept going, doing what they could, and always ready to help others. Ethan knew he couldn't just walk away and forget this encounter. He had to do something, not to repay Noah for changing his tire, but to repay life for giving him the chance to reflect on himself. The next morning, Ethan returned to the city, but his mind remained with Noah and his mother. He spent the entire morning sitting in his office, staring out of the large window at the bustling cityscape. In the past, he had always believed that money could buy everything: respect, status, even people's loyalty. But Noah had shown him that some things couldn't be bought. They could only be given from a sincere heart. And for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't thinking about investments or profits. He was thinking about the true meaning of helping others. Without hesitating any longer, he picked up the phone and called a few friends in the construction industry. "I need a team to repair a house in the suburbs. It's a small project, but I want it done immediately." On the other end of the line, his friend sounded surprised. "Ethan, I thought you retired and didn't care about charity projects anymore." Ethan chuckled lightly. "Maybe I used to think that way, but not anymore." After that call, everything moved quickly. He hired a skilled team of workers, coordinated with suppliers for materials, and planned a full renovation of Noah's home. There was no need to demolish and rebuild, but the house needed repairs where it had worn down and replacements for anything unsafe. Once everything was set, Ethan returned to Noah's house. That day, the sky was clear and the sunlight cast a gentle glow over the dirt road leading into the small neighborhood where Noah lived. As Ethan stepped out of his car, Noah's mother, Linda, stood on the porch, looking at him with surprise. "Mr. Cole?" she said, masking her astonishment. "You're back." Ethan stepped up onto the porch and smiled. I have a proposal, and I hope you'll accept it." Noah emerged from the backyard, his t-shirt covered in dirt from working in the garden. "Hey, sir," he greeted cheerfully, but his eyes quickly narrowed in suspicion as he noticed the trucks pulling up with construction materials. "What's going on?" Noah asked, his voice carrying a hint of caution. Ethan took a deep breath and slowly said, "I want to help you and your mother fix this house. Replace the roof, repair the electrical and plumbing systems, reinforce the fence, and maybe add a few more things to make this place stronger and safer." Noah's mother was momentarily stunned, her hands tightening as if she were struggling internally. "Mr. Cole, we truly appreciate this, but we can't accept such a big offer." Noah nodded in agreement. "You don't have to do this, sir. I know our home has a lot of issues, but we're managing just fine." Ethan looked at them, understanding the pride in their words. They didn't want to feel like they were receiving charity. So he smiled and spoke in a calm yet deeply sincere voice. "It's not that I need to help. It's that I want to help. And Noah, you taught me an important lesson. Helping others isn't about personal gain. It's about doing what's right. I can't just walk away and do nothing." Linda glanced at her son, then back at Ethan. Finally, she smiled. A genuine, heartfelt smile mixed with emotion. "If you truly want to help, then we accept this kindness." Noah didn't say anything at first, but he lowered his head slightly, then looked up at Ethan with gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, sir." At that moment, Ethan realized that the most fulfilling feeling wasn't receiving, it was knowing that kindness had touched someone else's heart. The repairs began the very next day. Neighbors came to help, workers labored tirelessly, and the air was filled with joy and energy. Noah wasn't just standing by watching, he eagerly joined in, learning to use a hammer, measuring wood, and even painting the walls with a bright, happy smile. From a distance, Ethan watched it all unfold. His heart felt warm in a way that money could never provide. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Noah walked up to Ethan. "Mr. Ethan," he hesitated, "do you think I could do things like this when I grow up? I want to help people, just like you helped me." Ethan looked at him, feeling a deep sense of joy. He placed a reassuring hand on Noah's shoulder. "You're already doing it, Noah. You've taught me that kindness has a way of spreading." The boy grinned, his eyes shining in the golden light of the setting sun. When the project was completed, the house was no longer just a place to stay. It had become a true home. Ethan knew that he hadn't just changed Noah's life. The boy had changed him as well. And that was what mattered most. As Ethan left the town, he was no longer just a lonely old businessman. He was a man who had rediscovered the meaning of life, thanks to a boy with a heart greater than any fortune. Ethan Cole had thought that his visit to this small town was just a fleeting moment, a coincidence in the grand scheme of his life. But he had been wrong. His encounter with Noah and his mother didn't just change them. It changed him in ways he had never imagined. For years, Ethan had lived a life of material abundance but spiritual emptiness. He had everything a man could dream of: money, power, prestige. But all of it seemed meaningless when he saw Noah's genuine smile. A boy who had so little but was willing to give without expecting anything in return. Now that Noah's home had been repaired, Ethan knew he couldn't simply return to his old life. He had found something far more meaningful than success: a new purpose. After leaving the town, Ethan felt an undeniable urge. He couldn't just help one family and then return to his luxurious life as if nothing had happened. He wanted to do more. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his elegant office in the heart of the city, Ethan opened his laptop and began typing an email. To the board of directors, "I would like to formally announce my decision. I am stepping down from my position as CEO, effective immediately." The entire office was stunned when Ethan announced his retirement. His colleagues, the same people who had long admired and respected him for his sharp leadership, couldn't understand why he was walking away from it all. One of Ethan's longtime friends, Richard, walked into his office, raising an eyebrow in disbelief. Ethan, are you sure about this? You spent your entire life building this empire. What are you going to do now? Ethan smiled, his eyes reflecting a newfound determination. I'm going to do something that truly matters. Richard shook his head, but in his gaze, there was a glimmer of admiration. A few weeks later, Ethan drove back to Harlan, the small town where he had met Noah. As he traveled, he felt the change within himself. This wasn't just a random trip. It was a journey of self-discovery. When he arrived at Noah's house, the boy was outside helping his mother hang clothes to dry. The moment he saw Ethan step out of the car, his eyes lit up. "Mr. Ethan!" Noah ran over, as excited as if he were greeting a long-lost relative. Ethan smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. "How have you been, kid?" Noah's mother, Linda, stepped out onto the porch with a warm smile. "You're back." Ethan nodded, but this time he wasn't just here for a visit. He had a plan. "I'm not just back," Ethan said, looking at Noah with a promising gaze. "I want to do something bigger." In the days that followed, Ethan got to work. He had spent his entire career building companies, but this time he wasn't building a business. He was building a non-profit organization to support struggling families in the area. He met with the town's mayor, small business owners, and local residents. At first, people were skeptical. A wealthy man from the city coming here to do charity? But when they saw Ethan rolling up his sleeves and working alongside them, the looks of doubt slowly turned into trust. Together with a group of volunteers, Ethan established the Noah Foundation, an organization dedicated to repairing homes, providing scholarships for children in need, and supporting struggling families. When Noah heard the name of the organization, his eyes widened. "You named it after me?" Ethan chuckled. "You're the one who started all of this. If you hadn't helped me that day, I wouldn't be here now." Noah's face turned red, but his eyes shone with pride. The project quickly gained momentum. More families in town received help, homes were repaired, children were given better opportunities for education, and most importantly, the community grew stronger and more connected. One day, while Ethan was checking the progress of a house renovation, his old friend Richard unexpectedly appeared. "I've been thinking a lot about what you did," Richard said, crossing his arms as he studied Ethan, "and I realized maybe I need a change too." Ethan smiled. "So, are you here to help?" Richard nodded. "Yeah, but I'm not doing this for free. You have to teach me how to build an organization like this." Both men burst into laughter. A year later, the town of Harlan had transformed in ways no one could have imagined. Roads were repaired, schools had new equipment, and most importantly, people began to believe that they could make a difference. Noah, now a teenager, had become a vital part of the organization. He didn't just help repair homes. He came up with new project ideas and even started a youth volunteer group in town. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Noah and Ethan sat on the front steps of the house, watching the warm golden lights glow from the homes around them. "Mr. Ethan," Noah suddenly said, "did you ever think you'd be doing something like this one day?" Ethan shook his head with a soft smile. "No, I never imagined it, but maybe life always has a way of leading us exactly where we're meant to be." Noah smiled, then spoke with quiet determination. "One day, I want to do this too. I want to help others, just like you helped me." Ethan felt his heart tighten with emotion. He placed a hand on Noah's shoulder, his voice deep and full of meaning. "You don't have to wait for one day. You've already started." As the last rays of the sunset disappeared behind the mountains, Ethan knew that he hadn't just changed Noah's life. Noah had changed his forever. And that was the magic of kindness. It never stopped with just one person. It spread, creating ripples that no one could ever predict. Ethan's journey wasn't ending here. It was only just beginning. The sun slowly set behind the hills of Harlan, painting the sky in a brilliant shade of orange. The golden light illuminated the newly repaired homes, the once quiet streets now bustling with life. But the real transformation wasn't just in the buildings. It was in the people, in the sense of unity that this small town had rediscovered amidst the chaos of life. Ethan Cole stood on the porch of Mrs. Ruth's house, gazing at the scene before him, his heart overflowing with emotions. He had once believed he would only stay here for a short while, help a boy, then return to his luxurious life. But now he wasn't so sure anymore. Noah ran up to him, his eyes sparkling with joy. He seemed to have grown so much over the past few months. From a boy with worn-out shoes and a genuine smile, Noah had become an inspiration for the entire town. "Mr. Ethan, will you stay?" Noah asked, his voice full of hope. Ethan remained silent for a moment. It was a question even he didn't have a clear answer to yet. But there was one thing he knew for sure. His life had never felt more complete than it did now. After Mrs. Ruth's house fire, it wasn't just Ethan, Noah, or the town's volunteers who had changed. The entire community had gained a new perspective on kindness and the true meaning of helping others. The charity foundation Ethan had started received more support than ever, not only from generous donors in nearby towns, but also from the people of Harlan themselves, people who once believed they had nothing to give, now stepping up to contribute in their own ways. A carpenter volunteered to repair houses for free. A local teacher started evening classes for children from struggling families. Farmers in the area donated food to those who couldn't afford a meal. Small acts of kindness, but together they created something much greater. Ethan realized that happiness didn't come from how much one owned, but from how much one was willing to give. One morning, while sitting in the town's small cafe, a middle-aged man walked in and headed straight toward him. "You're Ethan Cole, right?" Ethan looked up and nodded slightly. He didn't recognize the man. The stranger smiled and placed an envelope on the table. "I'm a journalist. Your story with Noah has spread far and wide, and I believe it's something the world needs to hear." Ethan was stunned. The journalist continued, "You were once a successful businessman, but I believe it's here that you've found the greatest success of your life." Ethan didn't know what to say, but he understood that this was no longer just his story, or Noah's. It had become a beacon of hope for those searching for something more meaningful in life. That evening, Ethan and Noah sat on the front steps of the house, quietly gazing at the stars. A gentle breeze swept through, carrying the fresh scent of the earth and sky. "What do you think about staying a little longer?" Noah asked, his voice full of hope. Ethan smiled, his eyes soft yet thoughtful. "Maybe I won't just be a visitor anymore," he said. Noah couldn't hide his joy, but then his expression turned pensive. "Mr. Ethan, if one day you leave, will you forget about me?" Ethan looked at Noah, then gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "No, Noah, you've changed my life, and I believe that when someone changes your life, you never forget them." Those words weren't just for Noah, they were for Ethan himself. He knew that whether he stayed or left, what he had done, what Noah had taught him, would forever be imprinted on his heart. Ethan and Noah's story wasn't just a personal journey, it was a powerful lesson for the world. Kindness doesn't have to be grand, it just needs to be genuine. Noah had no wealth, no power, yet he had a heart big enough to help others without expecting anything in return. In today's world, people often forget that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life. Change begins with each individual. Ethan once believed that money was the only solution to problems, but in the end, it was his shift in mindset that truly saved him. If everyone was willing to step out of their comfort zone, the world would be a much better place. A community is stronger when we stand together. Ethan alone couldn't change an entire town, but when people united, miracles happened. Modern society is slowly losing its sense of connection, but if we choose to reach out and support each other, we can build a stronger community.
The formula for happiness isn't found in material wealth. Ethan once had everything: money, power, status. But it was only when he gave that he found true happiness. Never underestimate the power of one person. A small boy like Noah changed Ethan's entire life. That alone proves that anyone, no matter their position, can make a difference. Ethan still hadn't decided whether he would stay in Harlan forever, but one thing he knew for certain: he would never go back to being the man he once was. On his drive home, he looked up at the night sky, feeling a peace he had never known before. And somewhere deep inside, he understood that his journey was far from over. Whether in Harlan or anywhere else in the world, Ethan knew he would never stop helping others because he had learned the most important lesson of his life. Happiness isn't found in what we have, it's found in what we give.